So Dave, I think you need to do a snazzy intro like, hey, this is Dave Pryor with Leading Agile SoundNotes, Ask Mike edition live. I think people should hear you say that.
All right. Are you ready?
We're ready, man. Let's do it.
Good morning. Welcome to Leading Agile SoundNotes, our first ever live experiment here on the Facebook where you've all joined us. We want to thank you for taking time out of your day. We've all got fresh coffee. I'm the only one without 30 guitars behind me. But Mike Cottmeyer and Tim Zack are here. Tim's not going to talk a whole lot, but Mike is. So Mike, thank you for taking time out of your morning.
Happy to do it, man. I'm glad to be here.
Was the intro acceptable?
No, I think it was excellent. You always do a fantastic job.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
The rest of this could be a total disaster, but we'll see what happens. So thanks for the folks that are participating. And if you watch this later, thank you for watching it later. We're going to try to do some live podcasts to get questions and stuff from folks that want to send them in early or that are participating. So if you're a participant now, you can post a question into chat and we might be able to talk about that. We actually got some questions in advance, didn't we? Yes. And that's what I was about to get into. So we got some in advance. And there's one that we were going to try to focus on for today as sort of kind of framing things up.
A conversation starter, if you will, right?
Yes, yes. And it was a big question. So we're going to try to kind of slim it down a little bit. But the gist of it...
You're not going to read us the question, are you?
No.
Okay, good.
I never thought these stories were true, but okay. This person works at a large organization, like a couple thousand people. And they describe themselves as being in the upper left quadrants. This is somebody that obviously is a little bit familiar with quadrants. So
emergent stuff, yeah.
Emergent, convergent. And they want to move towards agility. They've started to make some steps, but they're really struggling with figuring out where to start. They have lots of dependencies, lots of red tape. There's still a culture where people, like the hero, the person that stays up all night and saves the day is a big deal. They don't have cross-functional teams. So when I was reading through all this, the thing that I was kind of getting to is like, what is like the MVP or the whatever you want to call it, the minimum? What's the bare minimum that an organization can do, whether they're fit or not, for transformation? Like, what's the very first toe in the pool that has to happen?
Yeah. So the interesting thing, right? So, and I just be really transparent with everybody who's joining us, right? I mean, hopefully if you guys are here, hey Daniel, how you doing? If you're here, you're probably familiar with our stuff a little bit. And the way that I kind of frame this in my head is that there's kind of two dimensions that we're operating on. There's the dimension of what are we trying to do within the organization, right? So like, what is the approach and what's the reference architecture? What's the destination, right? All that kind of stuff. But then there's also kind of how do you get buy-in to the change model? Okay. And we've learned a lot of this stuff the hard way. We're about 8 years old as a consultancy. And, there's things that we're doing now that we didn't do a while ago. And the way that we try to do this, it's like, I guess I'm going to try to make sure we're anchoring within the context of the question, but it's like, what is the minimally viable implementation?
Oh, there you go. That's a whole new acronym.
It comes back to me to teams, backlogs, working tested software, right? So that's the standard, right? We have to have complete cross-functional teams. We have to have teams that can operate off of a backlog. We have to have teams that can produce a working tested increment over a period of time. And the way that you get there is you have to start building a mental model within the organization to help you build consensus to try to get people to do it with you. And so like what we've done, like what we do with clients is like, we'll host a workshop and we'll walk through structure, governance, metrics, teams, backlogs, working tested software. What are the dependencies that are in place? What do we need to do to manage the dependencies now? What dependencies do we want to break over time? Once we break them, what kinds of management controls can we begin to deprecate? And so what you've got to do somehow is you've got to build a shared mental model with the key people in the organization about what does the end state look like and how are we going to incrementally get there over time. And then, so like for us, like we'll run a workshop with a bunch of leaders and then we'll go through and we'll do some sort of discovery where we engage folks in a more deep, meaningful way. And then we want to get a piece of the organization to a pilot. And a pilot for us, it's like an expedition moving to a base camp. So it's the delivery teams, it's the program teams, it's the portfolio teams, It's an instantiation of the basic governance model. It's getting the metrics and controls and the tooling in, but for a subset of the organization. So we want to figure out what that slice is, and then we want to move that slice to a well-defined base camp. And so that slice to the well-defined base camp, the expedition to the base camp, is the minimally viable implementation. It's not as agile as we want it to be, but it's probably as agile as we can be in the presence of dependencies and organizational constraints. Does that make sense?
So can I ask a question about
this?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm going to play the part of like one of my.
That's what you're here for, is to ask.
Yes. Yeah. I'm here to ask stupid questions. But this was actually a question that was sent to me by somebody else who works at our organization who was asking for somebody else as well, a friend. So all that stuff you just said is our approach. Mm-hmm. But let's say that I'm a Scrum Master and I'm in a company, whether it's 50 people or 1,000 people, and I want to do this, and there's all the dependencies and the bureaucracy and the culture of fear and all the other stuff. How do I mean, I can't do a workshop by myself. I don't have the sign-off ability to bring Leading Agile and to run a bunch of workshops. What do I do? So here's the risk, right? So I'll share the risk, and then I'll talk about what you do, right? So the challenge that I think a lot of people that are probably dialed in here have is that they are embedded deeply into an organization, right, and they don't have influence at the executive level to try to get this mental model kind of propagated out across the whole thing. The risk is that you create local optimization within your enterprise. Okay. And so what I'm getting ready to say is there's potential, again, just for it to be, we make it better within our little bit, but it doesn't make it better in the whole. And that's what you mean by local optimization. On my team, this works.
Yeah. It's great. It's great for us. It's great for our team. It doesn't necessarily improve overall delivery, right? Which is the ultimate litmus test for the stuff at scale. So, so it goes back to, right? So if I'm a Scrum Master, there's three different aspects that you have to attend to, right? You have to attend to the ecosystem that the team operates in. You have to attend to how the team operates, and then you have to attend to the outcomes that the team gets. So if you are a Scrum Master and you want to help that team be successful, the first thing that I would attend to is the ecosystem. And so teams, backlogs, working, tested software, right? It always comes back down to that. So does your team have everyone and everything necessary in order to be able to deliver the work? Is the product owner able to create a backlog that the team can operate off of that meets the criteria? Is the team able to produce a working tested increment at the end of every sprint? If they can't, then that forms your impediment list. Okay? Those are the impediments that are getting in the way of you being able to do Scrum. Okay. Now, so let's hold that thought for just a minute.
I want to come back to this specific.
Okay. So just hold the thought for just a minute.
Okay.
And then the practices within the team you have, right? So how you run sprint planning, how you do daily stand-ups, how you do reviews and retrospectives, how you do burn down charts, how you do release planning, right? All the different things that you're going to do within that ecosystem are going to enable the performance of the team, but they're also going to brutally expose the impediments that the team is encountering.
Right.
So one of the challenges that I see, like when we go in and into an organization, often there are Scrum Masters or coaches there on the ground, and with they're operating within their local ecosystem, okay? And they see all of these dependencies that are around them in organizational dysfunctions that are beyond their control. Okay. Now, what you've got to do, right? And so the tendency is to go inward and to go, well, you know what? I can't fix this. Can't fix this. Can't fix this. So therefore, I'm just going to get better at doing Scrum. We're going to run retrospectives better. We're going to run daily stand-ups better. We're going to do sprint planning better. We're going to do all these different things better. Okay. But it doesn't actually remove the impediments.
Sure.
Okay. So I think the Scrum Master has to recognize that going inward into the process isn't going to actually improve it. What they've got to do is they've got to go be a champion outward. And, you know, this is a dicey game. And so I want to be really real with everybody on the phones, right? A big part of the reason. So if you look at my history, I was doing agile coaching and scrum mastering and project management candidly with a company called Checkfree prior to their acquisition by Fiserv, but also prior to my time at version 1 and Pillar and starting leading Agile ultimately. And one of the things that I would try to resolve was the cognitive dissonance between what the organization was asking me to do and deliver versus kind of the dysfunction around me. And so in order to be a truly effective Scrum Master, you're going to have to be brave. You're going to have to understand those organizational impediments, and you're going to have to work with your leadership outside of your immediate team to help to try to remove those impediments. Because it's only through improving the ecosystem that any of this stuff's going to get any better. It's like just getting better at the practices of Scrum. Scrum's only useful to the extent that it shows you your impediments and you can remove them. And the fascinating thing is that, you know, and this is something you see in practice, and I don't mean to make light of it, but like if you're operating in a broken team and you're a Scrum Master or a coach within a broken team and you focus internally, you might be focusing on conflict within the team or how the team does planning or maybe how the team's collaborating or how the team's doing all these things, right? And that's all valid stuff to focus on. But if the team's operating in a fundamentally broken ecosystem, the challenge becomes is that no matter how good you get at the team level, it's not actually going to improve delivery. So you've got to be outwardly focused on the impediments that are getting in the way of the team's performance.
And people might also choose to find another environment. I mean, that was something that I had to do at one of the companies I was at when I got to that state where, and I'm not advocating anybody quit, but to do this stuff, I had to go work at some place that could do it.
Yeah, well, so therein lies the challenge, right? It's like, so you might find yourself in a place where the weight of the organization around you is such that you can't be happy.
Yeah.
Okay. And then sure, right. If you want to be a Scrum Master, then go find some place that is doing Scrum more effectively and able to do that. Right. But Scrum isn't designed to get Scrum Masters to quit and go find better fields, right?
Right.
Scrum is designed to improve the organization.
Okay.
And so I guess what I'm suggesting is that for the Scrum Master at that local level, the impediments that you're facing are not often inward focused impediments. They're outward focused impediments.
Right.
And you have to be brave. And what you'll find, and the reason why I went down the path of like when I was at, you know, back in some of my earlier career things, you know, I kind of neutered myself organizationally, or at least prevented me from being able to really advance into, but I had to be brave, and I had to kind of work with the organization to knock down those impediments. And sometimes, you know, that's not the, you know, again, I'd say sometimes that'll work against you in your career.
Well, that's why it's easy to have better to have an external coach, because you can throw them at the problem and then let them be at risk. Yeah,
you know, I mean, yeah, I don't want to be totally self-serving here in this conversation, but yeah, I mean, that's part of how we get hired in is like to come in to kind of break some stuff and to make some change that the permanent employees and the folks that have to live there for a long time, so they don't have to expose themselves that way, for sure.
Yeah. Can we go back to the impediments in the organization? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So when you started to kind of explain the answer you had a few minutes ago, you were talking about trying to do this stuff and how it's going to surface organizational impediments. Like you can get it working on your team, but it's going to show you all this other stuff in the ecosystem, and the ecosystem's not right. Yeah. So part of what you're going to have to do, I'm assuming, and this is going to take me a second to ask this question, is to help leadership understand, like, this is messed up. I was talking to a company last week, a smaller company, 50 people to design work. Trying to do Scrum doesn't work, right? They don't have cross-functional teams, and they barely have dedicated teams. They have like, everybody's working on like 17 projects at once.
Yeah.
My suggestion was, okay, well, you know that there's rough spots in Scrum, so why don't you use Kanban and like map out your entire workflow and let that show you these are the specific points where stuff's broke. Yeah. And then maybe take pieces of Agile. Maybe don't forget about Scrum. Just pick like one or two tools and try to solve specific problems using Agile practices. I mean, how do you feel about?
I mean, it's absolutely an approach, right? So one of the things about, you know, I don't know that I'd consider myself like a deep Kanban expert. I mean, we use it quite a bit at program portfolio levels, and clearly have some understanding of it, but I wouldn't consider myself like a David Anderson, master's Kanban guy, right? So the way that I understand Kanban and the way that it gets positioned in market a lot is evolutionary change. And so like, let's say, for example, that you had strict functional silos within your organization. You could absolutely, model that system into a Kanban, and you could start tracking the work through the Kanban, and you could recognize that batch size was too big and you had too much work in process and you had bottlenecks and constraints in different places and all that kind of stuff. And you could model it that way, and then you could work the process, and you could go through and you could explain that stuff to people, and then start to tweak the system over time to make those evolutionary improvements. By all means, you could do that. Okay. And maybe that's all you can do, right, in your situation. What I believe and what I talk about in like the executives guide talk is 80 to 90% of the dysfunctions in any given organization, we absolutely understand. We know, right?
Because they're very common, very similar across.
Absolutely, right? I mean, and I've had it's been a real blessing over the years. As a version 1, I probably got to work with 200 different companies. We did a count on the number of different organizations that Leading Agile supported over the last 8 years, and it's like 250. So we're pushing 500 companies that we've directly or indirectly touched. And you go across those 500 companies, and all the problems are the same. They're for the same fundamental reasons. They get expressed differently based upon the market and the domain and the people and all that kind of stuff. But the root causes of all the problems are fundamentally the same. And so what you have a choice, right? So if you're operating at that lower level, you can say, hey, again, model it, evolutionary change, right? All that kind of stuff. But it's going to be slow. It's going to be painful. The kinds of changes that you want to make, you risk it being a local optimization. Risk people around you not wanting to improve. But I apologize, but it's like you go into like even Kanban, right? Batch size is too big, and that you'll increase throughput if you reduce it.
But it's going to be slow and painful, and you might know batch size is too big, or the way that we have our sign-off structure with the clients is a problem or whatever. Yeah. But being able to show, to me, the visualization of that and being able to show like the drag and the cycle time or whatever, put that up on the wall and force people to look at it is different than me saying, I know I shouldn't eat Fritos because they're bad for me.
Right. So you always want to come back to.
I didn't even mean to do that. I totally did not mean to do that. It just went that way. Sorry.
Before you took it there. So yeah, right.
I know I should not drink 4 Loko in the morning, but things are going to happen.
At the point that that's all you can do. Like, I mean, I've been in situations before coaching teams where you just get to the point where it's like you can't get the demand management patterns under control. There's so much technical debt and defects. There's so much like organizational dysfunctions and dependencies. And so absolutely, if you want to use the tools in Kanban or you want to use the tools in Scrum and be really structured and disciplined and understand and build models to expose that dysfunction, and to be able to communicate it out into the organization in a data-driven way.
Okay.
Absolutely, right? But to me, it's like that's almost like I'm not that patient, I guess, is what it boils down.
Okay. Well, because I mean, you're coming in as somebody who has the experience, you can see this stuff. I'm thinking from the perspective of somebody who doesn't have the opportunity to bring in a coach that has to educate management and say, look, this is the jacked up thing here.
Yeah. But here's the challenge, right? In those situations, a lot of times when I've gotten to that point, and that's what I'm guiding a team to do, what I'm basically doing is I'm guiding the team to like, let's do this in such a way to where at least we're being intellectually honest with ourselves, and we're not going through the motions of Scrum and thinking it's going to be some sort of panacea.
Sure.
So let's just talk about, let's be really real about the dysfunction that we've got. Let's be really real about our impediments, be really real about our dependencies. Let's model it in such a way, and let's start using the data to start trying to create local improvements, right?
Okay.
And again, that's like a last ditch effort for the sanity of the team.
Yeah.
Because usually when the organization is kind of that broken and that messed up, right? It's hard for the team to take that data up.
Yeah.
Because the problems that the management team is dealing with at that point probably are not unique to that individual team. And they're not interested necessarily in fixing that individual team. Like you walk into organizations and there's literally 10 times more stuff to do than could possibly ever be done in the organization. And there's contracts signed and there's commitments made and there's executives with their jobs on the line and all this kind of stuff. And when you're that overloaded, when the system is that out of balance, right, that chaos gets moved all the way down into the lower part of the organization. Like I'll give you like a perfect example. So
well, this guy with the 4,000 people in his company is a perfect example.
Well, the example that I was going to give you, right? The example that I was going to give you was like early on, there was an organization here in Atlanta that I was coaching. And it was only like 4 teams that we were working with. And like at the time, you know, what I was brought in to do and the agency that I had within that organization was to help get the Scrum teams performing. Well, so we were able to get the Scrum teams performing pretty well, but you know, as soon as you get the Scrum teams performing, you starve the backlog, right? So now you starve the backlog and you go, well, okay, where is the organization going to get more backlog? Well, so we could say, okay, well, that's the product owner, but well, sometimes you get the product owner fix and you starve the strategy queue. So where do I get more strategy? Well, then you start to realize that the organization doesn't have a really clear point of view on where it wants to take things.
Right.
And then you get into the situation where there's you know, it's like the organization has been so dysfunctional from a delivery perspective so long that it hasn't forced the issue up into the strategy side to force them to make decisions. They've been able to blame the lack of strategy on the delivery because the delivery guys can't get anything done. We get the delivery side, and then you can't blame it that way anymore.
It's like an episode of House.
Yeah, well, so sometimes I never watched that show, so I don't get the reference.
All right.
But like, so part of the challenge becomes it's like sometimes like we walk in and we're doing like an expedition, and by our definition, an expedition is a vertical slice, team level, program portfolio, all metrics and tools, right? All that kind of stuff. Yeah. Sometimes it makes sense to deal with the demand side, right? The governance side, and to get some of the demand side rationalized first, so that we can start before we get the capacity side performant, right? Because we know it's going to starve. Like if you can do an initial assessment, you know where the starvation pattern is going to come from.
Sure.
And then you can decide how to do the transformation based upon like what you're seeing in the actual organization.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right?
It is, but if I'm that guy in the 4,000 person company, I'm still going back to like, I have one Band-Aid and I'm cut in 19 places. Where do I put the Band-Aid?
Well, so here's the deal, right? So what you're trying to force me into, and I'm gonna poke at you here a little bit, is to answer an impossible question, right? If you've got 19 cuts,
hold on, impossible, but question that most of these people probably have.
Well, but here's the challenge, right? It's still impossible. Just because a lot of people have it doesn't mean that it's a solvable problem. If you've got 19 cuts and you've got one Band-Aid, then put your Band-Aid on the thing that's bleeding the most, right?
Okay,
so you're not going to die. It doesn't mean you're not going to bleed out. It's just that you just don't have 19 Band-Aids, right?
So it's not impossible. You can keep yourself alive.
Well, maybe. So it's like, what do you do? Like, so this is like what I mean by impossible questions, right? So what do you do if your product owner will never work with the team and doesn't know how to write a backlog item and refuses to build the backlog, right? How do I do Scrum?
I know a place that has this exact problem.
But the challenge is you don't.
Well, they've got the teams writing user stories and creating backlog items.
But is that still Scrum?
Oh, no.
Scrum at that point?
No.
Right. Well, and here lies the problem, right?
But does it matter if they're doing Scrum or not?
Well, but here's the kicker, right? So if you are on that team, right? If you are on that team and you double down, getting back to the thing I was talking about before, you double down on like, we're going to do Scrum, right? We're going to do Scrum awesome. And you recognize that the impediment is, I don't have an ability to build backlog.
Right.
Right. And now you ask the question, well, my product owner won't do this. My product owner won't do that. How do I do Scrum successfully in the absence of the ability to build backlog? Right. The question is you don't, but the answer is you don't.
And does that matter?
I can, but I can.
They all have the guilt of not doing Scrum right.
Okay. So Sure. Okay.
I am trying to push you into something.
Yeah.
I want to see if I can do it.
The challenge becomes, right? So this is what, so for all the rest of you guys, the 16 people that are in the call here at this point, this is what behind the scenes of the podcast is. And Dave and I edit some of this stuff out sometimes. And these are the debates that we have internally because it doesn't matter. This is why I refuse to write a blog post on how do you do a better daily stand-up. It doesn't matter. How do you do better retrospective? It doesn't matter.
Right.
Like it doesn't matter. Right. And this is why I talk about the three things all the time, is because the only thing that matters is, can that team get a good backlog? Can that team deliver something of working tested value at the end of the sprint?
Can you get the business outcome you're looking for?
Yeah. And to answer, and this is what everybody needs to know. It's like, sure, you can do Scrum better. And so if you say, well, how do I do Scrum in the absence of the ability to get a prioritized backlog? Well, you can get better at daily stand-ups. You can get better at reviews and retrospectives. You can get better at burning down a list of technical tasks.
Yeah.
You can get better at doing delivery to yourself at the end of every sprint, right? Okay. You can get better at all that stuff. But here's the problem, right? This is the problem with Scrum right now, is we've got a lot of people that are getting better at doing that stuff. One of the most common entry point phone calls we get is, I'm doing Scrum awesome, but I'm not getting results from it. Like how in
I have to scale.
How in the world can, no, not even at scale, in a team. Like how in the world can you be doing Scrum great and say you're doing Scrum great if you can't actually get business benefit from it?
Right.
Well, you can't, right? And that's the problem that we're seeing with SAFe right now too. I'm going through the motions of doing SAFe really, really well, but it's not actually getting me what I need from a business perspective. Well, why not? Well, because and so at the end of the day, right, if you're that Scrum Master on that team, it's like, I'm like, fine, fight the good fight, right? Get really good at doing Scrum, get really good at doing metrics, use Kanban, right? Expose the data, do the responsible thing, right? Like back in the PMP days, there was like this code of ethics that we had to sign. And it's like you tell the truth and you don't hide data and all those things, right? So gather the data, get the data, tell the organization the truth, work with the organization to be high integrity. Absolutely.
Right.
But also don't fool yourself into thinking that doubling down on how to do Scrum better in the absence of being able to remove that impediment is actually going to fix anything for you.
Yeah, I was trying to see if I could get you to be like, no, you have to do Scrum better or not, but it doesn't matter. It's the outcome you're looking for, not whether or not you're doing the thing, like the process right. And I think that is the thing.
Well, that's the key, right? And so that's like from the very earliest days when I really started, because like if you look at like the trajectory of the things that I've talked about in market, like early on, it was very practices focused. It was about communicating Agile to project managers, right? It was all about translation of tools and techniques. And then like there was like this middle piece that I was talking about that was around failure modes, because what I was conceptually struggling with was, no matter how good I get at all these tools and techniques, if I don't fundamentally understand the ecosystem that has to be built in order for those tools and techniques to be relevant, then right. I'm going through the motions, right? That's where the cargo cult Scrum stuff comes in.
But and people think that's, I mean, yeah. I met all these people last week at the Digital PM conference that were all worried because they were doing it wrong. I mean, it seems to me like that's what the masses are worried about, is whether or not they're doing Agile right. They forget about why they're doing Agile in the first place.
So here's the thing, right? So this might actually get into a good segue into your
postmodernism question.
Yeah, that you wanted to talk about. Yeah, so here's the challenge, right? And so I wrote a post a couple years ago, and it was about that the emperor has no clothes kind of a thing, where it's like we're running around saying if you would just do Scrum the right way, then right. everything would work. And if things aren't working, then you must not be doing Scrum the right way.
Right.
And it's like what you said, there's a lot of guilt, and so like what I run around doing is I'm just talking about, look, if Scrum was designed, right? You go back into Schwaber and Sutherland's early work, you go into the Scrum guide, right? There is a structure that is implicit in Scrum, complete cross-functional teams, product owner that can build a backlog, able to get to a working tested increment at the end of every sprint. If you go back to the manifesto in 2001 and you look at all the different methodologies that were represented in that room and the values and principles that they came out of that room with, right? The thing that got lost in that translation was there was fundamentally an ecosystem. They would talk about co-location. Alistair Coburn wrote about osmotic communication, the nature of the relationship with the customer, the ability to respond to new information, right? All of this stuff was assumed in the methodology. So Scrum or extreme programming or crystal clear or any of these other things, what was assumed underneath the instantiation of the methodology was the ecosystem that methodology was intended to operate within.
Sure.
Okay. And the problem is, and this is where I think like certifications helped us and certification has hurt us because certification has created a tremendous amount of awareness and it's helped us move the needle as an industry. But what it's also done is it's also turned this rich relationship between ecosystem and process and outcome into process. Okay. And if you do this process, then the ecosystem will emerge and the outcomes will magically happen. Okay. And that it doesn't always work that way. Okay. It can work that way. I'm not saying it's impossible for it to work that way, but it doesn't always work that way. And so to your point, we now have a groundswell of people that are educated on process and are absolutely powerless to create the right ecosystem and therefore can't achieve the outcomes.
Right.
And that's not the fault of the process, and it's not the fault of anybody. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
And so you and I talked at our last podcast about this idea of what's post-agile.
Well, they haven't heard this podcast yet.
There is nothing post-agile, in my opinion.
Hold on one second, because they haven't heard that podcast yet.
Sorry, I'm getting around that.
It has. I know you are, and I'm glad. They haven't heard that podcast yet because we haven't released it yet.
But we didn't release it. Oh, okay.
No, it was supposed to go today, but we're doing this instead. So for the folks listening, there's been some conversations recently about post-agile, and I was asking Mike what that was. And when I've looked it up, all I can find is a bunch of articles that say like, oh, screw it, just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And I was kind of coming at it from this postmodern idea where it's just pieces and you can take them out of context if you need to and use stuff you want and discard the rest. But that's also what I teach people not to do in my classes. So I'm just curious if you think there is such a thing as post-agile and what it would actually mean.
Well, so the reason why I think that this post-agile stuff is coming around is because, so I almost wish like we could have like made it like pre-reading in order for everybody. So we'll go over some of the ground that we talked about on that podcast. So in the absence of like deep understanding about why this stuff works, okay, we're training people on the practices. And there's a belief that basically says, if I do these practices, then the ecosystem will emerge and I'll get the outcomes that I want, right? So just double down on the practices, get really good at the practices, and life is fine. Well, the reality is that doesn't happen. And so we have people that don't fundamentally understand like what's necessary in the ecosystem or how to get there or whatever, and they're doubling down on the practices, and they're using Scrum like a weapon, and they're using it as a way to bully people. And if the only thing you've got is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. Okay. Right. And so we've got a lot of organizations that are doubling down on Scrum and trying to get it right and by the book. And people are like, but the ecosystem isn't changed and they're not getting the results out of it that they want.
Right.
And so they go, well, Agile doesn't work. Well, of course Agile works, right? To me, whether iterative and incremental delivery, team-based delivery, encapsulation and orchestration, right? All that stuff just works, right? Yeah. To me, it's inarguable that it works.
But they've not been able to make it work.
Well, okay, but here's the thing, right? But it's like, this is the reason why I talk about the things that I talk about. It's that we're only teaching one aspect of it in the industry. And I think it's driven by certification. It's like if all we're teaching people are the practices, and we're not teaching people how to fundamentally change the ecosystems,
Right.
The sun just came in through the window, so like half my face is going to be lit up for a little bit. So apologize.
It's enlightened.
It's the problem of doing this in my home office instead of in a studio or something. So I can't control my environment so well. But anyway, so
But
yeah,
if you need a guitar, you're totally set.
we could absolutely could play some songs before the end of the podcast is over, right? So this is what I've taken as my personal mission in the industry is to educate people that the ecosystem and the practices and the expected outcomes have to be in alignment.
Yeah.
Okay. And what we're doing, and the reason why people are getting fed up with Agile and they're getting fed up with Scrum is because they're learning a set of practices that when applied in a ecosystem that is incongruent with those practices doesn't work. Okay. And it's not that the practices are broken, and it's not that the company's broken. It's just that the two are incongruent. Okay. So you have a choice at any point in time. You can pick whatever methodology you want. I don't care whether you do Scrum or SAFe or XP or Crystal or LESS or feature-driven development. You could do DSDM for all I care. Don't care. Okay. Do waterfall, right? For all I care, right? Whatever works for you. Just make sure that the process that you choose is congruent, because if it's incongruent, you either have one of two choices. You have to change the ecosystem to accommodate the process, or you have to change the process to accommodate the ecosystem.
Right.
What was interesting, right? And so probably where some of this stuff comes from, if you look at like the PMP world and you look at the traditional SDLC and waterfall world, right? It basically just assumes the organization to be whatever the organization is, right? Yeah. Organizations in functional silos,
map it out,
function, right? Whatever. Yep. Just map it out, build your Gantt chart, understand your dependencies, right? Put your estimates, right? All this kind of stuff. This is a total aside, but I was in Maui, Hawaii last week at a, it didn't suck, right? I was at a conference there, right? So I was kind of working. Lots of downtime though. And by the way, Maui is absolutely beautiful. It was awesome being there. It was almost like a retreat. But one of the talks on the first day was from a lady who worked for the Department of Defense. And what she's really doing was talking about systems thinking. And this isn't a technical talk. So this was kind of a technical talk within a pretty much non-technical conference. And so she's talking about systems thinking. And she was using examples of like loops and interacting of loops and things. And somebody said something to the effect of like, well, what do you do when there's 500 loops? Right? And I'm like, there's no way that any one human being is going to be able to model the interaction of 500 loops. Right? That's just work. So like at some point in time, if that's your world, like don't expect a whole lot of predictability out of it. Right? That's an impossible problem to solve. The only way that you can, I believe, bring congruence to that is to simplify the system that you're operating in. Okay? And Scrum necessitates that we simplify the system that we're operating in into a cross-functional team that has domain ownership, that has ownership over their technology component. They're operating from the playbook of a single product owner, able to produce something that product owner can sign off on at the end of the sprint. Okay. And if you can't create that ecosystem, right, then you could maybe do SAFe, right? So what SAFe is doing is it's saying, okay, well, we know that maybe any one given Scrum team is either not there or insufficient, right? So there's all these other players in the ecosystem. And so we're going to put a process around all these other players. Okay, so regardless of what you think of SAFe, right, what SAFe is, it's a response to the inability to encapsulate delivery within the context of a single team. So what SAFe's trying to do is to encapsulate delivery around the context of a value stream. Okay, delivering a PI. So when I think of SAFe, I think of like Scrum at scale, but at the value stream level. Right? At some point in time, though, even if you're going to do SAFe, you have to have the ability to encapsulate a value stream. Right? And anything that isn't encapsulated within a team has to be orchestrated, right? And that's where you get into different coordination mechanisms and different larger things at scale. Okay. Yeah, it's just fascinating, right? So it's like it has to be congruent. And so like if you're legit in a situation and you've just thrown up your hands and you say, well, you know, I can't fix anything in my organization. You can go inward, do the best you can do, and be super transparent and honest about the data, and just tell the truth to everybody all the time. and work with the people around you to solve whatever problems you can solve. Just start knocking out impediments however you can.
Sure.
That's awesome, right? Just be real about the promises that you make, because what people are going to start to do is they're going to start to feel like Scrum doesn't work.
Well,
This
maybe,
is where the post-Agile stuff comes in. So
yeah, or they feel like they're bad at doing Agile. But I guess, I mean, maybe that's it. It's just sort of letting go of the idea of having to do anything right, and just what tool can fix this problem that I see right in front of me. If I've got 500 loops, how do I let go of that compelling need for predictability?
So I'm gonna back it out, right? It's like it's like if you are operating from the mental model that says, if I get Scrum perfect, then I will achieve the results. So if I'm not achieving the results, then it's because I don't have Scrum perfect. So like, I don't live in a world of guilt and beat myself up, right? I just like, I don't know if it's being an entrepreneur, if it's how I'm wired, but it's like I don't own that. So that's hard for me to resonate. So if you're in that situation, right, then what I would suggest is give yourself permission to take a step back behind Scrum and to go, I know you've been told a story that says if you do Scrum perfect, then you will get these perfect outcomes. I'm not getting the perfect outcomes, so therefore I'm not doing Scrum right? And to recognize that there's another variable at play that is equally as important, if not maybe 100 times more important than whether I do Scrum right.
Okay.
I tell people all the time, like, I don't care. Like, I have zero respect, and I know I'm talking to a CST here, but I have zero respect for the rules of Scrum. Zero. Because I will violate them in a moment if I need to.
Yeah, I would too. But you have to know when to violate them, and not just violate them.
So when, like, if you guys Google my 3 things talk, right, or listen to anything I've talked about in the last 5-6 years, I always get the teams, backlogs, working custom software.
Right.
That is the only thing that I care about. Can I form a team? Can I build a backlog? Can I produce something of value? How I enable that with process is totally up to the local organization or the local team or whatever. Yeah. Don't care at all about whether you have a Scrum Master, a product owner, doing a daily stand-up meeting. I don't care about what techniques you use for retrospectives. I don't care what tools you use.
To me, this is the post-Agile thing. Like, this is what my hope is, that it would evolve.
Okay, so if what we're saying in post-Agile is post-dogmatic application of Scrum, well then,
or any of the practices,
I'm 100% in agreement that we should be post-dogmatic application of Scrum, regardless of context.
That just doesn't roll off the tongue.
Yeah, not much that I say. Like, the 3 things is like,
where are we now? We're in the post-dogmatic application of Scrum phase of.
Well, in the early stages, I like to say, like, what we really do is team-based, iterative and incremental delivery, rolling wave planning, progressive elaboration within the context of a rational program.
That's worse. An acronym, man.
How do you describe that?
All right.
You have to just get really practical with stuff like that. Yeah.
Let's totally abandon that now. Can we
cool.
We have 2 questions from the audience, and one I think is going to be short, and the other one might be longer. So I'm going to ask the short one first. And I don't know who this came from, but have you tried deploying Scrum in a mixed union/non-union environment? How would you do that when some team members have external constraints? So I guess maybe if you haven't done union or non-union, about internal and external consulting groups.
So this is how I think about it, right? So again, I'm going to go back to, like, fundamentals, right? Okay. I had an idea that I almost like wanted to call maybe this series like first principles, because, like, when I was listening to all the questions that you suggested, like, it's like they're almost always impossible to answer unless you go back to first principles. Okay. And so like, the first principle to try to answer this union, non-union, external constraints, that kind of a thing, is I go back to, as you might expect, teams, backlogs, working tested software. So at any given team of people, right, we want them to be as complete as possible, because we want them to be able to communicate a capacity indicator, right? A lot of times that's velocity, right? But we need some sort of ability to measure the delivery throughput of the team, whatever we're going to use to measure that. So the team needs to have a delivery throughput.
Sure.
Okay. The backlog that the team operates off of is the demand side of the equation. So we have the capacity side of the equation, we have the demand side of the equation.
Okay.
So what I want to do is I want to get the capacity side of the equation as stable as possible, right? So when I talk about complete cross-functional teams, no dependencies, right, all that kind of stuff, that's the technique that you use to get the capacity side stable. And then you've got to stabilize the demand side. And so to answer the question in as generic a way as you can, what I would probably do is I'd probably put the product owner, the people that represent the external constraints, the unionized environment, right? I'd probably put them into the demand side of the equation. And normally what happens is we create some sort of construct that's like, we call it like a product owner team or something that operates at the program level. Usually operates in a Kanban type system, collaborative, cross-functional, that is doing portfolio alignment at the top and doing demand to capacity rationalization on the bottom. Okay. So a team of people that can come together and that can make decisions about what work is going to be fed to the team.
Okay.
Now, if they're feeding to multiple Scrum teams, right, then their job is to feed the demand into basically the capacity containers represented by the Scrum teams.
Okay.
Okay. So you've got to establish the ability to measure throughput at the execution level, and then you've got to establish the ability to throttle demand to that throughput and that capacity at the execution level. And if I wanted to anticipate a question, I'd say, well, what if the people that are doing demand management can't agree as to what's important? Because what tends to happen is if demand management can't agree, then the teams are forced to rationalize that.
Okay.
Right. So they make trade-offs based on who's screaming the loudest, or what's going to release the most pressure.
Sure.
What that has the net effect of destabilizing the capacity or the throughput, right? Because delivery now becomes erratic.
Okay.
So you have delivery, right, the capacity side, and then you have demand management, which is how do I rationalize strategy to execution through decomposition and managing bottlenecks and increasing flow, right, all that kind of a thing.
Right.
And if the people in the middle can't agree, then there has to be something that they are subordinate to. And the subordination layer there is to the portfolio. And so the portfolio has to establish what happens in the presence of constrained resources when I don't have infinite capacity to deliver.
Some prioritization.
And I have to make trade-offs to maximize economic outcomes.
Right.
I have to have something that gives me guidance on how to do that.
Okay.
Now the question might be, well, my executives can't agree. They all fight with each other, right? All this stuff, right? Well,
welcome to the world.
We're getting into the impossible problem. Like, it has to be there, right? Somebody in charge. It would be like basically you being at home with your wife and daughter, and you have $1,000 a month to go to the grocery store, and everybody's demanding $750 worth of food, right? There's just not $2,500, $2,250. Sorry.
Okay, but I do think it's important to point out that
you have to make trade-offs.
Just because it's impossible, I get this. It doesn't mean that the companies or the people in the companies aren't demanding it anyway. Like, I know you've only got 3 people. Make them work 150 hours a day. We can't do that. Do it anyway.
But this is okay. So
it's stupidity, but it's all over the place.
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? So you have 2 choices. So what I would suggest is that there is no rational answer to the question.
Yeah.
Okay. So the only thing, so now what you're basically saying is, in the presence of no rational solution, what do I do every day?
Yes. Right? And I'm only kicking that question at you because I got that question.
But to the 12 people that are participating.
12,000.
Okay, yeah. So ultimately, once we get past,
there's 12,000 for those of you watching it. There's 12,000 people in
this
podcast right now.
So here's the interesting thing, right? So if you truly have no influence over the environment, and you can't actually solve it, you do the best you can at the local level, and you be honest and transparent. You communicate the impact of these decisions, and you put some stuff around it so you can at least sleep at night.
And maybe, you know, a couple of
If you're
those,
not doing that, you can always go someplace else to work.
couple
But
permanent
I don't
markers in a
live.
bag, take a hit off of that in the morning might help too.
So here's the interesting thing, right? So I don't live in the world of impossible questions, right? So if you go back and you look at like the transformation talk that I think we have a complete copy. We don't have the recording from 2018, but we've got a subsequent thing that I think I did. Where was I at? I think I did in Austin. And we've got a paper around it that you can download, right? There are ways of changing this, right, within companies. And so like, I just believe anything is possible to change. If you get the right level of access, you build the right level of trust, you have the right story, right? So you've got to go tell a bigger story, because like sitting here powerless at the bottom of the organization going, you know, woe is me, every problem's not my own, I can't influence anything, I just have to work within the crap ecosystem that I've got, how do I survive that?
Right.
Well, the answer is you hunker down, do the best you can, and just don't expect anything, right? But that's a crap way of like trying to figure out how to, you know, that's not the problem I want to solve. The problem I want to solve is how do you have a conversation to actually fix the ecosystem so the stuff will actually work.
I think one of the things, I was trying to find a picture of the responsibility process to hold it up at the camera, but I'm giving up. One of the things I think is important, and I want to go to Darwin's question, because Darwin's question, because I promised we do it, is
that what you wanted?
That's what I did. Yeah, that's what I wanted. That's Christopher Avery right there. You said, I don't live in the world of impossible problems, and I don't feel like I live in that world either, but that's because I believe both of us at some point made a conscious choice. You know what? I'm not going to do that anymore. But I run across so many people at conferences and in classes who are still in the impossible world and don't even understand that they have the ability to be like, you know what, screw that. That's stupid. It's not possible. Well, they don't feel like they have that power yet. And that's
maybe part of the problem, Dave, is that we've been you know, talking about this idea of bottom up. Agile implementation. Like if I just get Agile, then that's going to create success, and that success is going to propagate success, and right, all those kind of things. You know, one of the things that I strongly encourage people to do, right, is I ask people all the time, if you can answer this question, if you had total agency within your organization to do whatever you wanted to do, you could get executive support, culture could change, right? You could change anything in the ecosystem. What would you go do?
Right.
And I would suggest that most people don't have a clean answer. They can sense the problem they want to solve. They kind of understand thematically the space they want to solve it in, but they don't have a hypothesis on what they actually want to go change. They don't know what their ask is.
Right. They just want
things. They don't know what their ask is. So if and I get that all the time, right? So Leading Agile is about 75, 80 people now. We're growing. And, you know, somebody will show up to me and I go, well, I have this nebulous sense of a problem, and I have this kind of quasi understanding of the space that which I want to solve it in.
Right.
Mike, I want you to go figure it out for me and invest a whole bunch of money and go hire people to go do this. I'm not going to, right? I'm not going to, right? So what we're trying to empower people to do in this message is develop a point of view about what you want to change. Create a hypothesis for the economic impact that change is going to have. And then go ask somebody for funding to go do something about it, right? But then be prepared to be accountable for did that funding actually fix the problem? Right? Because here's the deal, right? It's like, as an executive, we're going to have a lot of executive conversations. The only way that executives want to spend money is if they can make a small bet, they have a clear hypothesis for the value that they're going to get from it. Right. And then a way to measure that they actually got that value. That is the world that your executive team lives in. They're accountable for the dollars that they spend. And so as employees, right, we can, if we really want to work from a high place of responsibility, rather than point the fingers at everybody else, let's us develop a hypothesis for how we want to spend the organization's money. Create an economic conversation about an accountability conversation. So once I've spent that money, I can go back and prove that these business results happen. Right. Okay. That's something that people could do. Right. But what we tend to do is to point at all the broken things around us and say that somebody should fix that for us.
Well, all right. Segue to the last question.
Are we doing on time? We've got like 8
Wait,
minutes.
we got time for one more question if you're quick.
Cool.
We got 8 minutes.
Okay.
This is from Derwin Roland.
You really think I'm going to be quick, Dave?
No, but that's why I've been trying to send you these text messages to tell you, Mike, we have to do the last
I'm
question.
like only paying attention to a little bit.
I've been typing some funny things in there.
Yeah,
All right.
I thought it was pretty funny.
All right. For an underperforming team, what is your approach to enhance self-management and self-organization? As the Agile coach / Scrum Master, is it wise to use the stick or the carrot? Which do you prefer, and can you give some examples? So, should you go and smack that team over the head and tell them, you have to be more self-organizing, more self-managing? Would that work?
Okay. So first principles, right? It always goes back to the first principles. So I approach almost everything from a very high place of responsibility. And
you should show the picture again.
Christopher Avery. I got turned on to Christopher Avery's stuff back in 2006 at my first Agile conference, and that responsibility process has absolutely shaped a lot of how I think about stuff. But anyway, so if you're going from a place of high responsibility, you think about like, what does a team need to be able to be? Are you tapping?
No, that's the remodeling upstairs. I'm gonna mute my microphone.
Yeah, you should mute yourself. I thought you were like getting super impatient with me.
No. I'm gonna put the link for Christopher.
Hurry up, Mike! Hurry up!
No. It's the,
so here's the deal. So if you're gonna come from a place of high responsibility, you have to ask yourself, what does the team need to be self-organizing and self-managing, self-directed, right? More generally, right? And what I would suggest is that I'm a broken record here, right? So nobody's going to come back because Mike only talks about the 3 things. If that team doesn't have,
because you haven't talked about the compass yet.
Well, it's true, right? Yeah. So everything and everyone necessary to be able to deliver an increment, right? One of the things that I talk about is the idea of the ability to be held accountable. Right. So if that team is indeed powerless to deliver what it is in their backlog, then, or they have to go and negotiate the management of the external dependencies.
Yeah.
It's going to be very difficult for that team to get to a place where they can commit coming out of a sprint planning meeting and deliver in a demo and retrospective. Yeah. Okay. It's going to be really difficult. So the first thing I ask myself is, am I doing anything systematically to undermine the team's ability to deliver? So the first thing I want to do coming at this from a high responsibility place is get the team everything necessary.
So can I ask
sure.
one question here?
Yeah,
so
sure.
You said, am I doing anything to undermine it? I kind of want to counter that with, am I doing anything to support it?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think about from the organization's point of view. So as an organization, so like when I have an employee that I believe is underperforming, like the first thing that I ask myself is, am I giving that person everything they need to be successful?
Yeah.
Right? Am I unnecessarily creating ambiguity in their job function? Right? Are they getting competing direction from me and Dennis?
Yeah.
Right? Whatever, right? So there's things that I can do that can, it's awful. There's things that I can do to create the thing for that person to be most successful. And then once I believe that I've reasonably given them everything that they need to be successful, then what I have to do is I have to evaluate, are they doing what they need to do to be successful? And then if they're doing everything they need to do to be successful and we're still not getting the right outcomes, then we might not have a good fit. So within the context of that question, right? So first of all, I want to make sure that I'm giving that team everything that they need to be successful within reason. And then is there anything that I can do to support them from a skills development perspective to work within that context to be more collaborative, self-organizing, right? All that kind of stuff. And then once I've done that, can that team get the results? What I generally find is that when a team won't self-organize, they won't collaborate, like there's usually some sort of external factor that is creating an incentive for them not to behave that way. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that they're operating in an ecosystem where they are, the incentives are aligned, the systems are aligned. And then in the presence of that, what I find is that most teams with coaching and support will will begin to
Turn the
behave that way.
corner,
It'll
yeah.
take a while, but they'll begin to behave that way. If there's
Once they start to trust the individual.
yeah, well, yeah, right. Because yeah, absolutely, right. And so it's not like out of the question that you might have somebody who's incredibly difficult, who probably just needs to find something else to do, maybe go work in a different part of the organization. I don't rule that out, but again, it's like the example that I use a lot is if I want 2 sales guys to cooperate in a region, but I have individual sales goals. Right. And sometimes they're soft, right? So if somebody has been consistently rewarded throughout the years for being a hero, right? They've been promoted, given more money, given bonuses, given all kinds of things to be a hero. And now you're asking them to operate as part of a collaborative team where they're not going to be rewarded that way anymore. Right. That's a tough thing to ask a human being to do. Right. So what you want to do is you want to say, you want to get the incentives straight. You want to create the right environment for them to be able to behave that way. But then you might find yourself in a situation where that person is so addicted to being a hero and just doesn't want to operate in a different way that they maybe need to go work in a different part of the organization where they can be a hero. I don't know. Right.
I mean, it's fun to be
getting underneath individual human beings. Like a lot of the things that we're talking about are systems oriented things, and putting people in the right system. But at some point in time, it does come down to each individual, and getting underneath the individual motivations or what might be holding somebody back will oftentimes take months of working with somebody. And,
it might be kind of a one-on-one thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. So let's put a bow on this, Dave. Where do you want to?
All right. So we got a couple questions we're going to save for next time. Thank you if you sent those in. If you liked it, let us know. Tim, where should they send feedback to?
They can respond to me via the email that folks got. If they got the email, they're on our email list. They can hit me up. My email is tim.zack@leadingagile.com. I'll put it in the chat here. And then if you're on Facebook, you could just continue to comment on this Facebook post and I'll watch it and we'll collect that stuff, from there and move it into the next one.
Maybe it'll give us some good blog post fodder.
Yeah. And time-wise, we need to figure out if it's better to do this in morning or at night. So if anybody has strong feelings about that, let us know too. But guys, thank you very much. This was, I would say, a pretty good success for a first experiment at this.
Absolutely.
So
thanks for coming, guys. Everybody, appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you all for listening. Mike and Tim, thanks, guys.
See you guys. Bye.
Soon.
Bye, y'all.